happy to have you on. Jody Armour, who set up an Instagram account just for this. And so we're so thankful to have you on, and really wanted to have you on first, but I think that Lumumba did a lot of framing that I hope that you can build from, and just around what the system of prisons and mass incarceration means, and how this COVID-19 crisis really kind of puts the system of oppression on steroids. So I'm wondering, you can say it better than I can. So I just want to open up the floor to you to kind of talk about what all of this means in this moment.
Thanks so much for having me share this conversation with you, Melina. You know that I have the utmost respect for, all of the important advocacy you've been doing, as well as scholarship and bringing the Boulevard together with the Academy. What we really see going on here is, as you said, my scholarship, I've used the N-word for one specific reason. We otherize black criminals. We demonize, we monsterize. And when we do that to our own, as Chris Rock did in the comedy routine that launched his career, and a lot of black people were laughing at it along with others when he walked back in front of an all-black audience and said, "I love black people, but I hate N-words." And an N-word is any black person who's done a crime. That becomes one of his core definitions. Then he's playing into a kind of politics of respectability in which he invites us in community to distinguish between those of us who are good, law-abiding blacks and those others that we can distinguish and distance ourselves from because they are just wayward, morally condemnable blacks who we don't have to care about, we don't have to show care and concern. And so when they wind up in jail or in prison, they don't have the same kind of support, the same kind of advocacy on their behalf. And then that sets the stage for what we're seeing today. The epicenter for COVID-19 cases in America today, prison. They have really just jaw-dropping disparities in the cases and the infections that are in the prisons. And when I take my students up to San Quentin, or you go down to Terminal Island in San Pedro, you go to prisons anywhere in the country and you see grossly disproportionate numbers of black folk in those prisons. And so the people that we are indifferent to are disproportionately black faces. In fact, the demographics in the prisons are very similar, Melina, to the demographics that are down here in Skid Row. When you go in Skid Row, you see that 75% of Skid Row is black, not people of color. You don't see percent of Skid Row people of color. You see 75% of them are black. And so what now is happening is, you saw that when this was not viewed as a disproportionately black issue, COVID-19 wasn't seen as being something that the black community was bearing the brunt of. A lot of people were talking about, we gotta circle the wagons and come together and stay in place, shelter in place, stay at home, so that we can all, get through this together. But once it got a black face of any kind, once people started seeing that it was disproportionately burdening black folk, you all of a sudden see all these protests sprout up, in which people are saying, "Hey, I need to get a haircut. I need to get that Whopper live, and if we have to spend some human lives, that's okay." Especially when in the back of my mind I'm thinking the disproportionately black lives. What we don't really recognize a lot of times as Americans, or as people in the United States who are on the ground that were stolen from the Native American Indians, the indigenous people who are here. But those of us who are here now, what we don't recognize is that what happens to those prisoners boomerangs on us and happens to the rest of the society outside the jails and prisons. Because people churn in and out of jail. They're going in and coming out. Not only the prisoners are going in and coming out, but the staff, the corrections officers are going in and coming out. They're getting those infections in there, and they're bringing them right back out here into the general population. And so if we aren't taking care of the most vulnerable in those prisons, we aren't taking care of ourselves. And the only way to take care of the most vulnerable in those prisons is to decarcerate. Get rid of. There shouldn't be anyone in there who's a low level nonviolent offenders should not be in there. All right, number one. We need DAs who are willing to do things like Chesa Boudin is up in San Francisco. Jackie Lacey is not willing to do that down here in LA, which is really where it needs to happen, to go in there and say, if you're just in here because you don't have the money for bail, your pre-trial detention, but the only reason you're here is you don't have money, we have to let you out. If you pose a real risk of violence to the community, well, of course we can keep you in. We don't have to talk about that. That's not what money bail is about. Money bail is about keeping people in prison who don't have the money to buy their way out, and it violates the presumption of innocence that we're all supposed to enjoy. But if you have a pre-existing condition, you need to get out of there. If you're elderly, you don't pose a real threat of violence when you're in your 50s and 60s. We need to get you out of there. And so we need to institute all those kinds of programs to decarcerate so you can have real social distancing in the jails, real sanitation, real hygienic conditions so that we can do something about this.
Right. And you and I were both part of a forum up in San Francisco with Chesa Boudin about decarceration, where he issued something called the Justice Guarantee. And so it was about releasing pre-trial folks, but it was also about what we see in Los Angeles is corruption really multiplying itself, right? So the use of gang databases. Chesa Boudin committed to only prosecuting people for their current crimes, right? So we're not going to add enhancements because you were identified in Los Angeles. You have a very high chance of being falsely identified as a gang member. That's not a crime, right? Prosecuting you under 3 strikes laws. He says he's not going to do that, right? And so what we've seen is just in a matter of a few short months, he issued this Justice Guarantee in February. He said it's not enough to honor Black History Month in words, you have to do it in deed. And we've seen a drop in incarceration in San Francisco County by 50% just by doing these things, and a concurrent drop in crime. So releasing people from jails is not causing a spike in crime, it's actually decreasing crime, or there's a correlation to the crime decrease. Can you just speak very quickly to that? Because people will say, well, if you let people out, then crime is going to go up.
Yeah, when you, I was just talking to Chesa Boudin and the supervisor up in San Francisco, one of their main supervisors, Fewer, who have committed now.
Not Mike Fewer from Los Angeles. It's a different.
No, not Mike Fewer. No. This is a supervisor Fewer up in San Francisco, who brought forth some legislation in which they are closing down County Jail number 4, which is on top of the Hall of Justice in San Francisco, and they're going to have it closed down by November because they've been aggressively reducing the jail population since the COVID-19 outbreak and before. So like you just pointed out, Melina, the total jail population in San Francisco now is hovering around 715, 720 now.
So 720 people, that's the total prison.
Total jailhouse. The total jailhouse population in San Francisco, and they're doing that at the same time crime has dropped, right? It hasn't gone up. All of the naysayers, all the doomsayers, all those people who are making the apocalyptic predictions that if you reduce the draconian, harsh, kind of punitive way we go after low-level offenders and the like, that all hell is going to break loose and crime is going to run rampant through the streets. It's just not borne out. You just look at the San Francisco experience. And they were saying the same thing about stop and frisk in New York, you may remember. They said if we stop and frisk, crime is going to go through the roof. They stopped stop and frisk, and crime continued to go down. So there's a lot of just canards and lies that people are saying about crime. They don't really know what makes crime go up and down except this. We know this much. When you create criminogenic conditions, crime goes up. When you have people without jobs, without health care, without a safety net, when they're hungry, when they're desperate, desperate people turn to desperate undertakings like crime. And so the more
Right.
you can reduce desperation, the more you reduce the crime rate. That much we know. Work on it on the front end and not on the back end by giving police departments more money to crack down on the down and out. That's what really is
Yes.
against crime.
Yes, yes. Jody Armour, I could talk to you for the rest of the hour, but we can't because we have two more guests that we need to bring on. We're hoping that you'll come back. We want everybody to keep their eye out for your book that's coming out soon, In Theory. And thank you for that work. The other piece of that book that we don't talk about very much, but I'd love to have you back on to talk about it, is you're saying start with low-level offenders, but we also have to align ourselves with those who, may have done some stuff. Maybe they really did commit the crime that they're accused of. And how do we not try to cast ourselves as good Negroes, but remember that as long as some people are cast as ends, we're all ends, and we have to stand together in that. So I really appreciate you. I told you that when I read your manuscript, it was one of the most important reads I've ever engaged in, ever. And so I just appreciate your work and your intellectualism and your commitment to the liberation of our people.